What we're saying in the budget is we're asking those in our country to contribute a little bit more.
Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David, and today we're going to take a look at the capital gains. Chrystia Freeland, she increased the capital gains for a reason. It's one that where most of us are not thinking about. It's one I didn't initially pick up on. I had someone email me and tell me this, and I just noticed on CTV, one of the analysts, Tom Mulcair, who I think in general can be quite fair sometimes, he has pointed this out today as well. There's a sneaky trick that they did that nobody's looking at. But to do this, we're going to go back in time. We're going to pull up the time capsule and see what Chrystia Freeland had to say 9 years ago.
The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the IMF has issued a warning about the inflated Canadian housing market, cautioning that home prices have jumped more than 60% over the past 15 years. Canadian families with a personal debt burden, the IMF warns, is among the highest in the OECD, are at risk of $100,000 losses they can ill afford. The IMF says Canada needs better data, something this government is bizarrely opposed to, and more coordinated financial oversight. When will this government quit electioneering and fear-mongering and table a budget that addresses Canada's cooling economy and overheated housing market?
She's talking about an overheating housing market back 9 years ago when you could buy a house for like $300,000 in kind of greater Vancouver area, greater Toronto. Vancouver is a little higher than that. It was about $500,000 back then. But Calgary area was like $200,000. So we're talking like housing prices were good. They were cheap. The next clip we got here is just from a couple days ago. It says news conference held to discuss budget measures. Just look at this in contrast.
My name is Beth Penny. I'm with NTV News, and my question is for the Deputy Prime Minister. Can I ask about changes to the capital gain tax? And, you know, we've heard from local physicians that they're concerned about how this will impact recruitment and retention when we have doctor shortages in Newfoundland and Labrador and across the country. What do you say to them right now?
Well, look, I would start by talking about what the objective of our budget is, what the mission of our budget is. And our budget is about fairness for all Canadians, about giving all Canadians, especially younger Canadians, millennials and Gen Z, a real opportunity to have a middle class life. And we know that that requires investments. It requires investments in housing. It requires investments in affordability. It requires investments in economic growth. And so to make those investments, we need to find a way to finance them. And what we're saying in the budget is we're asking those in our country who are doing the best to contribute a little bit more.
This is actually nonsense. Chrystia Freeland, what she's done is increased the capital gains, what she says is the upper 0.01% or whatever it is. No, this increase in the capital gains is actually an increase on the middle class. She found a way to tax the middle class without calling it that. I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about first, and then we'll jump into this interview here with Tom Mulcair. But basically, if we look at this, the residential population of Canada, you can see the bulk of Canadians is in here, and it kind of, it goes this way, but we're talking 25 up to 80. But the bulk is here, but there's still a lot of people that are 65 plus. Now, if we look at the wealth distribution, though, because we're talking boomers, we're talking World War II, the war ends, people are having euphoria, and they're making kids, and they didn't think they would get back alive, and you have a huge flood of newborn kids after the war. That group there is here. If we look at this article from the Fraser Institute, ironically, it's from 2017, so things have gotten a lot worse since. But if we look at this graph, this shows the average household wealth in Canada by age group. Now, this is actually probably going to be way up here. It'll skyrocket because of the value of houses have gone up so much. But look at this. The richest group in Canada is 66, 67? And then it starts to dwindle down as obviously people retire, then they're not making money anymore. Basically, this whole group here has houses and they're worth a lot of money. And by taxing the capital gains, basically what this has turned into is an inheritance tax. Anyone who's got parents that are alive, they're in their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, or even their 60s, once they pass, they've got a house, passes down to their kid, boom, that house gets taxed. And it's taxed with capital gains. This is turned into an inheritance tax. That's what this is. She found a way to tax the middle class without calling it that. Let's just look at a few more graphs here and then we'll go to that interview. But this is net worth of every province and age. Nova Scotia, right there, 55 to 64. You know, $750,000. You still got $620,000 net worth here. We go with Toronto, 1.3, almost 1.4 million versus 1.225 million, like whatever, 1.2 million. So like when these people pass away and their house gets transferred to their kids, there's Chrystia Freeland to take your money. That's why she increased the capital gains, is to capitalize on all this money. We're going to go through this interview first, and then I've got a page where I've broken down all the math so you guys can see the exact number of how much Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau will be stealing from you when your parents pass, or if you're a parent and when you pass. Sounds a little dark saying it like that, but when you pass and you pass your house on to your child, what they will be taxed at when passing your house on.
Now, this decision to not scrap the changes proposed to capital gains taxes, is it justified?
Well, it's not unexpected because they need the $19 billion in new taxes that they just imposed on Canadians for the good and simple reason that if they don't, they'll bust the $40 billion deficit limit that they set for themselves to try to show some semblance of fiscal responsibility. So there's no way around it. The rest becomes an argument about what fairness is. I just heard Mark Holland, and I read what he had to say over the weekend. I mean, just a couple of days ago, another minister in Trudeau's cabinet was saying, yeah, well, maybe some Canadian doctors will go to the States, but, you know, we'll bring in more foreign-trained doctors. I don't think that that's the most positive way to look at this issue. Yeah. I think that, it's retroactive, and that's what Bill Morneau, Trudeau's former finance minister, said. There are a couple of really good analyses out there that are starting to show as well that it is, in many cases, a form of disguised inheritance tax, Renee, because, you know, families who had invested and thought they were going to be able to give assets and knew that they would be taxed at a certain rate and held on to them are now going to be forced to either have a fire sale or to pay a heck of a lot more taxes that were unexpected. And there's one other thing that's worth looking at as well. For decades now, women's groups have been saying, look, we should look at tax changes through a gendered lens because women live longer. So to the extent that you're in many cases taking away what people have put away for their retirement, often self-employed people, that's going to hit women the hardest. And these are things, of course, that have not, I'm sure that they were looked at by the great staff that they've got at finance. Somebody's got a paper written on this saying, yes, it will hurt women more. But that's the type of thing that's starting to come out. So it's one thing to use a line like fairness, but it doesn't resist a close analysis. I think there are definitely sides to this $19 billion tax increase that Trudeau brought in a couple of weeks ago that are not fair.
Now, already there are plenty of people in this country who do not have a family doctor. Off the top of my head, I believe it's something like, I want to say 83% or something like that who have a family doctor. So is this only going to push more doctors away?
Well, that's the point. I mean, you know, and it's exactly right what you're saying, by the way. And not only that, it's predictable that some will just pick up and leave and say, well, this isn't fair. You're changing the deal. And my way of being remunerated and putting money away, because they don't get a big fat government pension, they have to put money away for their own retirement. And then Mark Holland pulling out of thin air numbers and saying, oh, they've made a lot of money on their investments. We're just going to tax some of it back. Based on what? And you know, it's a bit of a fight that they love to have because they wanted to try to paint this as being against the rich. This is Trudeau and the Liberals trying to say, you know, look at Poilievre. He won't do this. He won't go after the wealthier people in our society. But it hasn't been thought through. Not only is what you say true, Renee, but think about this. When you're reducing what a doctor is taking home, the next thing they're going to do is when they have a negotiation with their provincial government for their next salary raises, they're just going to say, well, we've just lost 10% of our money. Because the federal government has taxed it away. We're going to negotiate that from the provinces now. And then the provinces are going to turn back to the feds and say, well, you've got to top off. You're already reducing the proportion of healthcare that you pay. You're going to have to help us out of this bind. So it's a self-defeating increase in taxes. It wasn't thought through. Trudeau wanted to have a fight with the Poilievre and the Conservatives. They very wisely just left this stinking pile there and are letting the different groups do the type of analysis that you and I are talking about now. But it's not.
This is not good for Canada. This is definitely going to push doctors into whether they're going down to America or just switching industries. With their knowledge and degrees, they can go do other things. And when we need doctors most, they shouldn't even be tinkering with something that would push doctors away. Leave it to the Liberals to do more stupid stuff to hurt Canada even more.
Not working. His budget has failed, and now he's just trying to turn all of this into attacks against the Conservatives in general and Poilievre in particular. I don't think that's going to work either.
I remember it wasn't that long ago that you and I were chatting and saying that this budget was going to have to be something that, would really change minds about the Liberals. A lot of people weren't happy with them. How is it going, do you think?
Well, we've had a half a dozen polls since the budget, and some people are saying, well, it'll take a little bit more time for fights to occur, for example, with the doctors, and that might change people's perception of Trudeau. But overall, those polls are showing zero movement. They're showing, on average, the Liberals trailing the Conservatives by 20%. So if this budget was supposed to give them a big boost, it hasn't. They're spinning now that if they manage to catch up 5 points between now and the end of June, they'll consider that a success. But since when is it a success to be only 15% behind your principal opponent? So I think that Mr. Trudeau is in a spot of trouble, and I think it's reflected by the fact that we've had really top stories written about people organizing for Dominic LeBlanc. We've seen a very serious potential candidate in Mark Carney giving speeches to groups of liberal thinkers and MPs, showing his stuff, his progressive side, his deep knowledge of finance and of the environment.
Carbon tax Carney is not going to get elected. Let's get real. Nobody wants a stupid carbon tax. Even the Liberals are quietly whispering they don't want the carbon tax. Carbon tax Carney is a hard no.
Definitely getting ready for a launch if and when it comes. The pressure has not started to build yet on Trudeau, but I believe it will. It's just in the natural order of things when you're 20 points behind.
Dominic LeBlanc as well. Like, come on, the guy. There's not. He's like Trudeau's little buddy. He's going to be just as trustworthy as Trudeau. All right, so let's jump back over here and let's break this down here. So if you look at the number of deaths in Canada, the deaths are just rising because we have so many in the boomer era that they're just starting to go now. And with those houses being transferred, that's where those capital gains come in. We got another one here, median and average net wealth of Canadian households 2016. So this is a while ago. Obviously, this has got a huge spike since. Same thing, 1 million here for this 55 to 64 range. And once again, this is 8 years ago. So these people are 8 years closer to the average age of death in Canada, which I believe is 82.6 years total, but men and women, that's where it's more important to look at. So almost 85 for women and 81 for men, which is pretty good. But still, I mean, you looked at these numbers on this one, if you're 64, add 8 years, this group is already 72, go down, 9 years or something, but 72 years old, not everyone gets to make it to 80, and some will make it to 90 or 95. Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau know this. They've looked at this graph and they're like, here, this is the group we want to target to take the most amount of money. And the best way to do it is to take money out of the sale of a house. So we look at the math here. I've done it on a $1 million house, and a lot of people's houses will be worth a lot more, but we're doing $1 million on the old system before Chrystia Freeland changed it. Half of that value that you would get transferred over, that house you'd get from your parents, would be eligible to be taxed, and that would be taxed at your tax rate. For this, I'm using the example of 30% tax rate. On the new system, the first $250,000, half of that would be eligible. Anything after that would be 66.6% would be eligible to be taxed. In this case, the remainder of $750,000 would be at that rate. In the old system, $1 million house, half of it would be eligible to be taxed at 30%, is $150,000 that we would have to pay before. In Chrystia Freeland's new system, that $1 million house gets broken down into two segments here. The first $250,000, half of it is still eligible to be taxed, and that's $125,000, 30%, which is their tax rate I'm choosing for this, $37,500. The remainder of that, $750,000, 66.7% of that is now eligible to be taxed, which is $500,000. Multiply that by 30% is $150,075. Now you need to add these together. Add those together, $187,575. So this is the difference. We used to pay $150,000 on the sale of a $1 million house. Now it's $187,000. If we look at the math here, $187,000 minus $150,000 is $37,575. So Chrystia Freeland has basically found a way to tax every Canadian who has a family member when they pass on, they pass their house down. They're taxing every single Canadian almost $40,000. Or it'll be more than that. If it's a $2 million house, it'll be double that, meaning nearly $80,000. This is just gross how they found a way to once again tax the middle class. This is not taxing the rich, the ultra wealthy. They find loopholes to get around paying these taxes. And if you have a family member that has two houses, their primary residence and their cottage house, and you've already got your own house, your own primary residence, you get those two extra houses, you're going to be looking at that times two. The elite like Justin Trudeau have corporations that are held in trusts in places like Cyprus where there's no capital gains, there's no income tax. That's how they get around paying taxes. And it's tax fraud, but I think it's because of the loopholes, it's legal. The rest of us who don't know how to do that stuff, we're the ones who end up paying all this tax. So anytime Chrystia Freeland says we want the rich to pay just a little bit more, she's actually saying we want the middle class to pay a little bit more. Not only that, we want your parents who bust their butt for their lifetime, when they pass down that house to you and you finally can get ahead a little bit in life, we want you to pay a little bit more. So jumping on here, I got a couple other clips to show you guys. This one was reposted by Senator Hosakos. This is an illegal protest. You're not allowed to camp out in McGill. This is the McGill University campus. And this is the Palestine protest going on here. Of course, the cops are not showing up there because we have a double standard in Canada where only Canadian citizens have to obey the law in Canada. Next up, we got a clip of Justin Trudeau. Do I even need to say anything here?
Sikh values are Canadian values. Truth, justice, openness.
Come on, guy.
Service, human rights. These are the values at the heart of Sikhism. These are the values at the heart of Sikh Canadian communities, but they're also...
Okay, we don't even need to listen to that junk. Look at this guy. Like, come on, Trudeau. I was just sent this article. So in Langford, this is not too far away from me here. People can't find dentists that are willing to participate in the federal dental program. So, this is what we've been hearing across Canada. There's like 8 dentists have signed up total. I don't know if that 8 number was just in the Atlantic Canada or all across Canada, but either way, there's no dentist wants to be a part of this free dental care program. It says in here, like, people don't want to show up to a dental office and then find out, oh yeah, they actually have to pay because they weren't a part of the program, that office. It's just like a big cluster. It's a big mess. Next up, we got a clip here from China, and it gives a very stark yet real, as you can see here, coming to the West soon. This is probably what Justin Trudeau wants for us. What we're looking at is a bunch of police that showed up, and they're charging these farmers because they're not growing what the CCP wants, what they mandate, which is sugarcane. They're growing bananas instead. Yeah, arrest him because those bananas... This is terrible. Like, what is this? They just showing up and carrying these guys out because they're not growing sugarcane? If we let Justin Trudeau keep pushing, this is what Canada will turn into. We're probably due for a bit of humor, so buckle up. I'm probably gonna have to mute this though. Yeah, we're gonna have to mute that, sadly. Okay, I can't have that playing too long. Who spent the time doing this? Somebody used some tracking on the heads to keep all the heads stuck onto the chickens. Somebody, well done. Whoever made this, well done. So jumping over to my group now, we've got a planned boycott of Loblaws. Apparently, some people are saying this might actually work. There's also that was steal from Loblaw's Day. What was that? That's May 12th or something? I'm curious to see if people try to go through with that. We can tax the air and we can tell that we're saving the planet. Look at this. He's a David Suzuki. They were right. The second wave is worse than the first. I could sit here all day and I'm still full of So we've got a Phillips head, a flat head, a hex head, and a... Look at this wacko little Justin triggering truck set. Freedom convoy. Probably have. This is probably one of the best one of these whiteboard ones. China pet, watch as it grows into a dictator. Fun for the whole family. No freedom, no rights, no future. I'm going to destroy Canada too late. Yeah. That's where we're going to wrap up today's episode. Let me know in the comments down below if this affects you guys. The capital gains, it is a sneaky tax. It was designed very specifically for this. Once you take a look at those graphs, it is so clear. That is why they chose to tax the capital gains like they did there, because they know a bunch of people are getting older in age, and once they start moving on, they're going to just reap the rewards of all those high value houses. It is slimy, and these people are just absolute snakes. Thanks for watching to the end of the video here. Be sure to thumbs up the video and subscribe if you haven't. Turn on those post notifications so you get notified of all my videos. I'll keep bringing you guys the truth. We're going to keep fighting for freedom. I'll see you guys in the next one.